You sabotaged this entire operation, Dante bellowed, his voice ricocheting off the walls of the packed conference room. Every head snapped in my direction. 43 pairs of eyes bore into me like drills seeking oil. The quarterly presentation I'd spent weeks preparing froze on the projection screen behind me. Complex financial models that now served as my public execution backdrop. These projections are deliberately corrupted, he continued, waving a stack of papers. The acquisition target isn't overvalued. Your analysis is fraudulent. The room temperature seemed to plummet. Executive board members exchanged worried glances, while junior analysts squirmed uncomfortably. I stood rooted to the carpet, my brain struggling to process what was happening. After 8 years of building my reputation at Everhart Investments, I was being accused of deliberate sabotage. The system logs don't lie, Dante said, his voice dripping with disgust. Changes traced directly to your credentials. Made at 2:13 a.m. last Tuesday. My mouth opened, but words failed me. Tuesday night, I'd been home asleep, preparing for my mother's surgery the following morning. Priscilla from Human Resources materialized beside me, her perfume overwhelming as she leaned close. Your belongings are packed, she whispered. Security is waiting to escort you out. The walk across the trading floor felt endless. Colleagues I'd collaborated with for years suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. My team, people I'd mentored through countless late nights, kept their heads down. Only Mira, my assistant, dared meet my gaze, her eyes wide with shock. Outside, rain pelted my face as security watched me climb into a taxi. 8 years ended in 12 humiliating minutes. At home, I sat motionless at my kitchen counter, staring at the rain trailing down my window. My phone remained silent. No calls from colleagues asking for an explanation. No messages of support. Just crushing silence that confirmed what I already knew. I'd been completely erased. By Sunday night, my professional obituary had been written across industry forums. Former classmates sent awkward messages asking what happened. Recruiters who'd been pursuing me last week now ghosted my emails. Then the notifications started. First a trickle, then a flood. By midnight, I had 94 missed calls from Everhart's main switchboard and an email from Preston, the CEO himself. Subject line, urgent, message. Please call me immediately. Merger in jeopardy. Need to discuss your personnel file. Before I continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this unbelievable journey of betrayal and vindication, tap that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Imani Riley. Before my public execution at Everhart, I'd been known as their most thorough risk analyst, the person executives called when they needed absolute certainty about an investment. I graduated top of my class from the business program at Northwestern, turned down 6 job offers, and chose Everhart for their promise of meritocracy. The best analysts rise regardless of background, the recruiting director had said. For 8 years, I'd believed it. My analytical models had helped Everhart avoid 3 potentially disastrous investments and identify 8 undervalued acquisition targets that now generated 31% of the firm's annual revenue. My performance reviews were stellar. My bonus increases consistent, until Dante Walsh arrived. Dante joined 6 months ago from a competitor, sliding immediately into the role of chief investment strategist, a position I'd been told was being groomed for me. He arrived with Preston's full endorsement and a mandate to accelerate growth. From our first meeting, something felt off. While reviewing my risk assessment for a potential healthcare acquisition, he'd leaned back in his chair and sighed theatrically. These risk factors seem excessive, he'd said, tapping his pen against my report. We need more optimistic interpretations. The data doesn't support optimism, I'd countered. Their customer concentration is dangerously high. 3 clients represent 68% of revenue. Imani, he'd said, using my first name with artificial familiarity. Analysis should support strategy, not obstruct it. Preston wants this deal. Make it work. Over the next months, Dante systematically excluded me from strategy meetings. My team was reassigned to his direct reports. My access to certain data systems mysteriously became restricted due to technical issues. When I raised concerns about the Welton acquisition, the billion-dollar deal now in question, Dante had interrupted my presentation to the investment committee. These projections rely on outdated methodologies, he'd announced. My team has prepared alternative scenarios showing much stronger growth potential. His alternative scenarios ignored fundamental problems with Welton's market position. Their claimed technology advantage existed only in their marketing materials. Their customer growth had plateaued 3 quarters ago. Their margins were thinning while their competitor acquisition costs decreased. These weren't opinions. They were verifiable facts buried in data that nobody bothered to examine. When Preston had asked if I concurred with Dante's assessment, I'd stated my reservations clearly. The room had gone silent. Dante's smile hardened. Perhaps Imani is uncomfortable with more sophisticated modeling approaches, he'd suggested. We can discuss offline. That offline discussion never happened. Instead, my access to the Welton data was revoked the next day. When I complained to Preston, he seemed distracted. Dante comes highly recommended, he'd said. Give him some latitude to implement his methods. For 3 weeks, I watched from the sidelines as the Welton deal progressed. My concerns grew when I noticed discrepancies in the projected integration costs. Using my emergency override credentials, granted years ago for risk assessment purposes, I accessed the complete dataset late one evening. What I discovered kept me awake until dawn. Welton had misrepresented their customer renewal rates. Their technological infrastructure was obsolete, and most alarmingly, their overseas expansion, the crown jewel of their growth story, was burning cash at an unsustainable rate. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive analysis and sent it directly to Preston with Dante copied. The response? Complete silence. Then came the quarterly presentation where Dante accused me of sabotage. Now, staring at Preston's desperate email, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but a hollow ache. The vindication I'd imagined felt nothing like this. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Everhart's switchboard. Let them wait, I thought. Let them wonder. Let them worry, as I had worried. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against my windows like impatient fingers. I poured myself a glass of wine and watched lightning illuminate the city skyline. In the brief flashes, I caught my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, slumped shoulders, the posture of someone defeated. But I wasn't defeated. Not yet. My doorbell rang at 11:37 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Preston himself, soaking wet, his usual immaculate appearance disheveled. His driver waited in an idling town car below. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. Imani, he said, water dripping from his hair. Thank goodness. We need to talk. We needed to talk 3 weeks ago, I replied calmly. Now we need lawyers. His face contorted. Please, the Welton deal closes tomorrow at noon. The partners are waiting at the office. We need you to walk us through your analysis. The analysis I fabricated, the one I sabotaged the company with, that analysis? We know you didn't fabricate anything, he said, his voice dropping. Someone accessed the system using your credentials. The revelation should have been satisfying. Instead, it burned like acid. And you didn't think to verify before publicly humiliating me? Preston glanced nervously at his watch. Time is critical. The signing ceremony is in 14 hours. If what you found is accurate, it is. Then we're about to make the worst acquisition in the firm's history. I studied the man who had authorized my destruction. His expensive suit clung to him like a wet newspaper. His polished facade had cracked, revealing something I'd never seen before. Fear. What exactly did you find in my personnel file? I asked. Preston hesitated. Your background check, the detailed one from 8 years ago, which said that before business school, you spent 3 years as a forensic accountant with the Securities Commission, that you personally uncovered the Westridge investment fraud, that your testimony sent 2 executives to federal prison. The silence between us stretched like taffy. And you never knew this in 8 years? Personnel files are HR's domain, he admitted. I never had reason to look. Until now, I thought. Until you needed ammunition against me and found a landmine instead. What do you need from me? I asked, already knowing the answer. Everything. Your complete analysis, your methodology, your recommendations. And in return, name your price, he said without hesitation. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. You think this is about money? Then what do you want? The question hung between us as another lightning flash illuminated his desperate expression. What did I want? Restoration of my reputation? A public apology? Dante's head on a platter? No, I wanted something far more valuable. What I want, I said, stepping back from the doorway, is to understand why. Why did no one question Dante's accusations? Why did you allow my public execution without a single doubt? Preston's shoulders slumped. The board, the pressure to close this deal, Dante's reputation. Excuses, I cut him off. Not reasons. Rain continued to pour behind him, the wind occasionally sending sprays through my doorway. Preston looked pathetically small standing there, not the towering figure who commanded $1 trillion investment firm. "Come in," I finally said. "You're dripping on my welcome mat." My apartment wasn't large. An analyst's salary only stretched so far in the city, but it was meticulously organized. Preston seemed surprised by the modesty of my living space, as he awkwardly stood dripping on my hardwood floor. "Bathroom's down the hall if you want a towel," I offered, not out of kindness but because I didn't want water damage on my floor. While he dried off, I pulled out my personal laptop. Unlike my work computer, this one contained backup copies of all my analysis, a habit I'd developed during my regulatory commission days. Never trust a single system with your work product. Never. When Preston returned, I had the Welton data displayed on my screen. "Sit," I commanded, pointing to my dining table. For the next 40 minutes, I walked him through my findings. Welton's customer base wasn't just concentrated, it was shrinking. Their technology platform, advertised as revolutionary, was actually licensed from 3 separate vendors, with contracts expiring next year. Their profit margins in European markets were maintained through accounting practices that, while technically legal, masked alarming trends. "How did Dante miss this?" Preston whispered, his face ashen. "He didn't miss it," I replied. "He ignored it." Preston looked up sharply. "You're suggesting he knowingly pushed a bad acquisition?" I shrugged. "I'm presenting facts. Draw your own conclusions." The implications hung heavy between us. If Dante had deliberately championed a disastrous acquisition, the question was why. Incompetence seemed unlikely given his track record, which left more troubling possibilities. "We need you back at the office. Now," Preston said, checking his watch again. "The partners are waiting. You fired me, remember? Very publicly. We'll announce it was an internal misunderstanding." I laughed. "A misunderstanding? You accused me of corporate sabotage in front of the entire investment team. That requires more than a dismissive wave of the hand." Preston's jaw tightened. "What do you propose?" "I'll come with you right now, but I want 3 things. First, complete system access restored immediately. Second, I want to present my findings directly to the partners. No intermediaries, no Dante filtering my analysis. Third, when this is over, we discuss my future at Everhart on my terms." He nodded without hesitation. Done. 30 minutes later, we arrived at Everhart's headquarters. The normally bustling trading floor was eerily quiet at 1 a.m., with only security lighting illuminating the space. In the main conference room, 7 people waited around the massive table, all 5 managing partners, the head of legal, and Elise, the chief compliance officer. Notably absent was Dante. "Where is he?" I asked as we entered. "Julian," the senior partner, answered. "Unreachable. His phone goes straight to voicemail." An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. "Check the airport," I said, "and freeze his access credentials immediately." Elise raised an eyebrow but reached for her phone. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Preston cautioned. "Like you did with me?" I countered, connecting my laptop to the projection system. For the next 2 hours, I presented my complete analysis of Welton. The partners' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to outright alarm. By the time I finished, Julian had loosened his tie, and Warren, the most conservative partner, had unfastened his collar button, the equivalent of a primal scream in partner body language. "If we sign this deal," I concluded, "Everhart will be acquiring approximately $260 million in undisclosed liabilities, technology that needs complete replacement within 18 months, and a customer base that's already exploring alternative vendors." Silence filled the room. "How do we verify all this before noon?" Warren finally asked. "You don't," I replied. "Not completely, but you can confirm enough to justify postponing the signing." Elise returned, her expression grim. "Dante Walsh boarded a private flight to Geneva 3 hours ago. His system credentials were used to transfer documents to an external email at 8:17 p.m. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Geneva," Julian repeated slowly, "where Welton's principal investor is headquartered." Preston's face drained of color. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Elise interrupted. "I'm reporting facts. Draw your own conclusions." The echo of my earlier words to Preston wasn't lost on anyone. "We need to contact Welton," Warren said, reaching for his phone. "And say what?" Julian countered. "That we suspect our chief investment strategist has been working for them? Without proof, we expose ourselves to litigation." If we sign this deal knowing what we now know, I interjected, every person in this room could face regulatory action, possibly criminal charges. That got their attention. These were people who navigated complex financial risks daily, but personal legal exposure was a different matter entirely. What do you recommend? Preston asked me directly. All eyes turned my way. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than 72 hours after being escorted from the building in disgrace, I was now the person they turned to for salvation. Cancel tomorrow's signing, citing the need for additional due diligence based on new information. Launch an internal investigation into the approval process. Hire an independent accounting firm to verify my findings. Welton will sue for breach, the legal head warned. Let them, I replied. Discovery works both ways. And I suspect they'll back down quickly once they realize we've identified the accounting irregularities. Julian nodded slowly. It's our best option. By 4 a.m., the decision was made. Preston would call Welton's CEO at 7 a.m. to postpone the signing. The partners would prepare a statement for investors. Elise would begin an internal investigation into Dante's activities at the firm. As the meeting broke up, Preston pulled me aside. We owe you an apology, he said quietly. Yes, you do, I agreed, gathering my things. But that's a conversation for another day. Right now, I'm going home to sleep. But we need you here when I've given you everything you need. I cut him off. My analysis, my recommendations, my weekend. I'll be back at 9 a.m. as a consultant, not an employee. My rate is $1,500 per hour. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn was breaking over the city as my taxi navigated the empty streets. Exhaustion pulled at me, but beneath it was something else, a simmering anger that had nowhere to go. They had believed Dante without question. They had discarded me without hesitation. And now they expected gratitude for the opportunity to save them. When I reached my apartment, a text message was waiting from an unknown number. You should have stayed fired. Big mistake. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down. The threat was clear, but from whom? Dante? Someone at Welton? Or someone else entirely? Sleep evaded me despite my exhaustion. By 8:30 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and heading back to Everhart. The trading floor buzzed with rumors as I crossed toward the executive suite. Analysts whispered behind their monitors. A few brave souls nodded acknowledgement. Mira intercepted me at the elevator. Everyone's saying the Welton deal is off, she whispered, falling into step beside me. And that Dante cleaned out his office last night. Is that what they're saying? I kept my expression neutral. They're also saying you're back. Her eyes searched mine. Are you? The elevator doors opened. That remains to be seen. Preston was waiting in the conference room along with Julian and Elise. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know before they spoke. Welton threatened to sue for specific performance, Preston said without preamble. Their lawyers delivered this an hour ago. He slid a document across the table. A formal notice demanding Everhart honor the acquisition agreement or face litigation for damages exceeding $300 million. They claim we're manufacturing 11th-hour concerns to renegotiate the price, Julian added. I scanned the document, noting the aggressive language. This is a bluff. They know we found something. Perhaps, Elise said carefully. But we have another problem. The transaction committee minutes don't show your objections to the deal. According to the official record, you signed off on the acquisition. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I voiced concerns directly to Preston and the committee. The minutes show your concerns were addressed to everyone's satisfaction, Elise continued. Your electronic signature appears on the final recommendation. I never signed anything. My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. We believe you, Preston said quickly. But that's the documentary record we're dealing with. Records that would be discoverable in litigation. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Not only had Dante framed me for sabotage, but he had also falsified my approval of the very deal I had opposed. If Everhart backed out now, the doctored records would make it appear that I had suddenly changed my position without justification. Who has access to the minute system? I asked. Committee members, the recording secretary, and system administrators, Elise replied. And Dante? She nodded reluctantly. As chief investment strategist, yes. The room fell silent as we all processed what this meant. Everhart was trapped. Proceed with a disastrous acquisition, or face litigation with falsified internal records undermining their position. There's another option, I said finally. But you won't like it. Julian leaned forward. We're listening. Complete the acquisition as planned. Preston's jaw dropped. After everything you just showed us? Complete it, I continued, but with modifications to the purchase agreement that give us protection based on specific representations about their financial condition. They'll never agree to last-minute changes, the legal head objected. They will if the alternative is us walking away entirely and them explaining to their investors why the deal collapsed. I turned to Preston. But I need something from you first. Name it, he said immediately. Complete system access. Every database, every record, every email. Preston exchanged glances with Julian. Why? Because I don't believe Dante acted alone, I said quietly. And before we move forward, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Elise frowned. That would give you access to highly confidential information across the entire firm. Yes, I agreed. It would. The silence stretched as the implications sank in. I was asking for unprecedented access, the kind that could expose every skeleton in Everhart's closet. You have 4 hours until the signing ceremony, I reminded them. Decide quickly. Julian stood up. Give her the access. Julian, Elise protested. Do it, he said firmly. If there's any chance of salvaging this situation, we need to know what we're up against. As they filed out to make arrangements, Preston lingered behind. Why are you helping us? He asked quietly. After what we did to you? I met his gaze steadily. Who said I'm helping you? 4 hours. That's how long I had to unravel years of potential corruption while navigating a minefield of legal liabilities. The temporary workstation they'd set up for me hummed with 3 monitors displaying different datasets, email archives, transaction records, and system logs stretching back 5 years. We've given you administrative access, the IT director explained nervously. Every keystroke is being recorded for compliance purposes. I nodded without looking up. I'd expect nothing less. As soon as he left, I began methodically constructing search queries across multiple databases. Standard audit procedures would have started with recent communications, but I knew better. If Dante had orchestrated this elaborate setup, the groundwork would have been laid months ago, possibly before he even joined Everhart. 2 hours in, patterns emerged. 6 months before Dante's arrival, Welton had begun restructuring their corporate governance. 3 new board members appointed. Treasury operations relocated to Switzerland. A complex series of intercompany loans established between subsidiaries. Classic pre-acquisition window dressing, making the balance sheet look stronger than reality. Digging deeper into Everhart's communications, I found the first red flag. 18 months ago, Preston had met with Welton's chairman at an economic forum in Singapore. No record of this meeting appeared in Preston's official calendar, but expense reports showed a private dinner costing $4,700. I cross-referenced against Everhart's client prospecting database. Welton wasn't listed as a potential acquisition target until 3 months after that dinner. Interesting. Next, I examined the hiring process that brought Dante to Everhart. His employment file contained glowing recommendations from 3 different executives, all connected to financial institutions with business relationships to Welton. A tap on my shoulder interrupted my concentration. Mira stood behind me, holding a sealed envelope. This just arrived by courier, she said quietly, marked personal and confidential for you. The envelope bore no return address. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. Insurance policy. Use wisely. L. Leonard? Lisa? Luis? I knew a dozen people whose names started with L. Everything okay? Mira asked, noticing my expression. Fine, I replied, slipping the drive into my pocket, just unexpected. When she left, I resumed my data mining with renewed focus. Dante's email patterns revealed consistent communications with an external address at unusual hours, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always from his personal device rather than his work computer. The address belonged to a consulting firm in Geneva. I ran the name through the SEC database using my old credentials, which thankfully still worked. The firm was registered as a financial advisory service with just 3 employees, one of whom was Dante's sister. Time's up, Preston announced, appearing at my workstation. The Welton team is arriving in 30 minutes. What do you have? I leaned back in my chair, deliberately casual, enough to understand what we're dealing with. And what exactly are we dealing with? A conspiracy involving at least 4 people at Everhart, potentially including members of senior management. Preston's face tightened. That's an extraordinary claim. With extraordinary evidence to support it, I countered. But we don't have time to review it all now. You need to decide whether to proceed with the signing. Based on your recommendation? I smiled thinly. I don't work here anymore, remember? I'm just a consultant providing analysis. His jaw flexed with frustration. Imani, people's careers, their livelihoods, hang in the balance. What should we do? Proceed with the signing, I said, but insist on additional representation clauses regarding their customer retention rates and technology ownership. That's it? He looked skeptical. For now, I replied. The rest comes later. The signing ceremony proceeded with excruciating politeness. Welton's executives, dressed in identical navy suits, maintained pleasant smiles even as Everhart's legal team introduced last-minute additions to the agreement. Simply standard language, Julian explained smoothly, formalizing the representations you've already made about customer retention. Welton's CEO hesitated, glancing at their chief counsel. A whispered consultation followed before he nodded agreement. Of course, we stand behind our reported figures. I watched from the back of the room, noting which executives appeared nervous and which remained calm. The Welton CFO kept checking his watch. Their head of strategy couldn't stop adjusting his tie. But their CEO maintained perfect composure, either supremely confident or completely unaware of the house of cards he presided over. After signatures were exchanged and congratulatory handshakes completed, champagne appeared. I declined a glass and slipped out unnoticed. In the elevator, I plugged the mysterious USB drive into my phone. It contained hundreds of audio files, recordings of phone calls between Dante and various Welton executives dating back nearly 2 years. Call after call detailing how to structure the acquisition to conceal Welton's actual financial condition. And one recording of Preston himself, agreeing to fast-track the deal in exchange for something called Project Alpine. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just Dante's scheme, it went much higher. I sent a text message to a number I hadn't used in years. Need to meet, bringing evidence of securities fraud. Today, the response came almost immediately. 3 p.m., same place. At precisely 3 p.m., I walked into a small coffee shop 10 blocks from Everhart's headquarters. A woman sat alone at a corner table, her government ID badge turned discreetly away from view. It's been a while, she said as I sat down. 3 years, 4 months, I replied. How's life at the commission, Leah? She smiled. My former supervisor at the Securities Regulatory Commission, the L who had sent me the USB drive. Busy. Getting busier after today, I imagine. She nodded toward my bag. You said you have evidence? For the next hour, I outlined everything I'd discovered. The falsified minutes, the accounting irregularities, the secret meetings, the recorded calls. Leah took minimal notes, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. This is extensive, she said finally. Coordinated securities fraud across multiple organizations. Involving the CEO of one of the country's largest investment firms, I added. She studied me carefully. Why come to me directly? Why not take this to Everhart's board? Because the board chairman sits on Welton's advisory council. The whole system is compromised. Leah nodded slowly. What do you want out of this, Imani? Justice, I replied simply. That's never the only answer, she pressed. What else? I considered the question carefully. Protection for the innocent employees who had nothing to do with this, and a public clearing of my name. That's it? No financial demands? No revenge? The truth is revenge enough, I said quietly. 2 weeks later, I watched from my apartment as federal agents entered Everhart's headquarters. Preston was escorted out first, followed by Julian and 3 Welton executives. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing the scene for the evening broadcasts. My phone buzzed with a text from Leah. Indictments unsealed, 32 counts. Well done. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto my couch as the financial news anchor broke into regular programming. Breaking news. The Securities Commission has announced charges against 7 executives in what they're calling one of the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes in recent history. The complaint alleges that executives at Everhart Investments conspired with Welton Technologies to conceal financial irregularities ahead of a billion-dollar acquisition. My doorbell rang. Outside stood Elise, Everhart's compliance officer, looking exhausted. May I come in? She asked. I stepped aside to let her enter. The board has appointed me interim CEO, she said without preamble. We're cooperating fully with the investigation. Congratulations, I replied. Tough first week. The board wants you back, she continued, as chief risk officer, reporting directly to me. Complete autonomy, double your previous salary, and a public statement clearing your name. I smiled. Is that all? They're prepared to offer equity partnership as well, she added. First non-executive partner in the firm's history. And if I say no? Elise sighed. Then we'll struggle to survive this. The firm needs someone with unquestionable integrity to help rebuild trust. The partners know it's you or no one. I walked to my window, looking out at the city skyline. I want something else. Name it. A complete restructuring of the risk management division, new compliance protocols requiring multiple independent verifications before major transactions, and a whistleblower protection program with real teeth. That's ambitious, she said carefully. It's necessary, I countered. And non-negotiable. Elise studied me for a long moment before nodding. I'll take it to the board tonight. After she left, I returned to the window. Below, news vans lined the street outside my building. My phone continued buzzing with messages from former colleagues, journalists, even old classmates suddenly remembering our friendship. The revenge wasn't in Preston's perp walk or the criminal charges he faced. It wasn't even in my triumphant return to Everhart with unprecedented power. The revenge was in the truth finally being acknowledged, in systems changing because I demanded it, in knowing that no one would ever again dismiss my concerns without thorough investigation. 3 days later, I walked into Everhart's headquarters as chief risk officer and equity partner. The same security guard who had escorted me out in disgrace now nodded respectfully as I passed. Analysts who had averted their eyes during my walk of shame now watched with careful admiration as I crossed the trading floor. In my new office, formerly Preston's corner suite, a single envelope waited on the otherwise empty desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Mira. Some people climb the ladder, others rebuild it entirely. Welcome back, boss. I smiled, tucking the note into my jacket pocket. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting new risk management protocols that would transform not just Everhart, but potentially the entire industry. The greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's reformation. Creating a world where what happened to you can never happen to anyone else. If you've stayed with me through this journey of betrayal and vindication, I hope you've found something valuable. Perhaps a reminder to trust your instincts, maintain your records, or recognize that sometimes the long game is the only one worth playing. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when everything and everyone is against you. Because sometimes the person everyone tries to silence is exactly the one who needs to be heard the most.